The scorching fingers made me shiver. Tonight, Bruce was particularly passionate. His lips were a bit cool. The alcohol in my body was completely ignited by him. My head was dizzy, and I felt every cell in my body being activated. Be gentle, don't rush, I plan to give me to you today. In the darkness, I gasped and hugged Bruce tightly. But I didn't know if it was my illusion. After I said this, I clearly felt his movements become more forceful. Bruce. I screamed his name, clinging tightly to his shoulders, burying my face into his neck. His neck was sweaty, the scent was pleasant but somewhat unfamiliar. I just thought it was Bruce's little quirk, deliberately spraying some perfume. But the next moment, my face seemed to brush against something cool. This is a necklace? Did Bruce wear a necklace tonight? No. Bruce never wears accessories. He doesn't even wear our engagement ring. This man isn't Bruce. My blood, which was burning hot, froze. I pushed him away, hastily put on my clothes, and ran out of the room. Only then did I realize that I had gone the wrong way when I came out of the bathroom. I entered the wrong room. Recalling the thrill just now, my body started to stir again. I looked back, and that man didn't chase after me. I breathed a sigh of relief. I splashed my face with cold water in the bathroom, feeling clear-headed. Under the starlight, I carefully identified the direction and walked back. As I walked, I kept telling myself to forget about the accident just now. Even though that man gave me an unprecedented experience. But the person I'm going to marry is Bruce, we're getting married next month. And the person I'm giving myself to tonight can only be him. Standing in front of the room I shared with Bruce, I took a deep breath and opened the door. Bruce. I just called out his name. Suddenly, something felt wrong. It seemed like there was more than one person in the room. A layer of cold sweat climbed up my back. I retracted my leg that had stepped in and stepped back. But someone grabbed my hair from behind and threw me to the ground. The moment I fell, a few men's malicious laughter erupted. Yo, this chick is quite tender, haha. Who are you? Where's my fiancé? He's coming back soon. I advise you to leave quickly. I suppressed my panic, pretending to be calm and scaring them, hoping they would back off. But unexpectedly, it only brought more arrogant laughter. They swarmed like hungry wolves, holding down my hands and feet, starting to tear at my clothes. One of the men climbed on top of me. In the struggle, I seized the opportunity and kneed him hard. The man screamed in pain and fell to the side. I thought they would retreat because of this. But unexpectedly, my resistance only stimulated them more. The thugs grinned hideously, preparing for a sinful feast. They were reckless, not afraid of being discovered at all. A rough palm slapped my face, and I tasted blood. A hand reached into my clothes. Through the gaps, I turned my head to look around. Bruce still hadn't appeared. Could he really have met with misfortune? Please no! I used all my strength to call out Bruce's name. Tears blurred my vision, I looked at the dim ceiling. I desperately tried to shake off those disgusting hands on my body. Despair, fear, grief engulfed me. Suddenly, the man who was tearing at my clothes flew out, landing several meters away with a wail. I suddenly saw hope. It must be Bruce coming to save me. I opened my mouth, trembling, about to call him, when I heard the thug curse. Screw you, Bruce. Didn't we agree that you would come to play hero after we stripped her naked? In an instant, I felt like I was struck by lightning, my mind went blank. These thugs were arranged by Bruce? I was stunned. In the blurred vision, a man wielding a baseball bat knocked the thugs down one by one. He stood against the starlight, tall and straight, broad-shouldered and narrow-waisted, his movements clean and fierce. In his actions, a bit of metal glinting from his neck caught my eye. With just one look, I was certain. He was the man I encountered when I entered the wrong room. Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. Can you still stand up? The man dealt with the thugs, took a long stride to my side, and draped his coat over me before asking, Wrapped in the warmth of his breath, I finally felt like I had returned to the human world. Everything just now felt like hell. I subconsciously shook my head, then quickly nodded. The man extended a hand to me. His palm was broad, with distinct knuckles, and there were still traces of blood on his fingertips. And somehow, some images flashed through my mind. It was as if my body still remembered the stimulation and pleasure this hand had given me. What a strange feeling. During my hesitation, Bruce finally appeared. Who are you? Emma, when did you meet him? What's your relationship with him? I looked at him as he frantically questioned me like a beast whose territory had been invaded. Without mentioning that just half a minute ago, I was almost raped by several men. Did he turn a blind eye? No. It was clearly premeditated. With reddened eyes, I answered irrelevantly. Bruce, do you know them? Answer me. Of course not. As expected, he denied it flatly. But his answer no longer mattered. Because the man had a baseball bat pressed against one thug's crotch, and with a few words, the thug confessed everything. It turned out that Bruce had always been resentful about my delay in having sex with him. So, he used the excuse of taking me on a trip, hired some thugs to rape me, planning to rescue me at the critical moment. I would be so moved that I would agree to have sex with him. As for the reward he promised these thugs, after succeeding, he would offer me to them. Then he would record the video as leverage, ensuring I would be under his control for life. Bruce, you bastard. I got up from the ground, rushed to Bruce, and slapped him hard across the face. Bruce would never know, I had planned to agree to give myself to him tonight. Seeing that things had been exposed, Bruce no longer pretended. He tilted his head and spat a mouthful of blood on the ground, his eyes filled with resentment and contempt as he looked at me. I put you on a pedestal, and you really think you're some kind of goddess? Acting all high and mighty? Who knows how many men you've slept with behind my back? If it weren't for your house, you think I'd even want to touch you? My eyes were bloodshot with hatred. I couldn't believe it. The man I had loved for 3 years, the man I was supposed to marry next month, was actually this disgusting. No, not just disgusting. This was a crime. I turned to leave, but Bruce wasn't willing to waste this opportunity. Or rather, he couldn't bear to lose my house. He tried to rush at me to tear me apart, but that man swung a stick and knocked him away. Finally, he looked down at me, his voice clear and gentle. Are you leaving or not? I nodded vigorously. Yes. Bruce cursed behind me, accusing me of having an affair with this man long ago. I ignored him and stumbled after the man. The man led me to an SUV. He opened the passenger door, but I clumsily tried several times and couldn't get in. I heard him click his tongue impatiently behind me. Then, an arm wrapped around my waist from behind and lifted me into the passenger seat. The firm, muscular lines pressed against the skin of my waist and abdomen, making me shiver all over. It was at this moment that I realized the zipper of my pants had already been torn off and was now loosely hanging around my waist. I felt both embarrassed and awkward. Just as I was about to reach out, the man's fingers suddenly hooked the waistband of my pants and pulled them up. I held my breath, not daring to exhale. Then, I heard him ask close to my ear, "Did you bring any clothes?" I calmed down and replied, "In the room. I had forgotten to bring them earlier. Wait here." The man threw down these words, then tossed the car keys to me, closed the car door, and turned back towards the hotel. I turned my head and, through the car window, could only see his increasingly blurry figure. But my heart, inexplicably, settled down. He came back quickly and didn't mention what he encountered on this trip, just threw my bag to me and then turned around. I saw a small spark of light at his fingertips in the night, followed by a faint smell of tobacco. Strangely, I didn't find it unpleasant. In the past, as soon as Bruce had even a hint of smoke on him, I would get angry. Thinking of Bruce, I felt both anger and hatred. It seemed like the man had eyes on his back. Just as I finished changing clothes, he turned around and got into the car right on time. At this moment, I had just taken out my phone, intending to call the police. Those bastards have already packed up and left. The evidence is completely destroyed. He suddenly spoke. My fingers paused, and I looked at him. He glanced back at me, his gaze somewhat deep in the dim light. They probably aren't doing this for the first time. I suggest you provide more information about those people when you report to the police. He gave me a couple of tips and then fell silent. I called the police and asked him to take me to the nearest police station at the foot of the mountain to make a statement. By the time everything was settled, the sky was already beginning to lighten. I stood at the entrance of the police station, thinking about my plans for a while, when I heard the man ask me, "Where are you planning to go?" Happiness Road? The blood in my body froze, and I looked at him in horror. Happiness Road was where my parents lived. I hadn't stayed there for years. How did he know? A huge sense of panic engulfed me. I stepped back, but the man took a step closer. How do you know? His dark, sharp eyes fixed on me, making me feel rooted to the spot, unable to move. Emma, you really don't remember me. The man suddenly sighed, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I was puzzled. It was only then that I had the presence of mind to take a good look at his appearance. This man was very handsome, with deep, well-defined features and long, narrow eyes that looked at people with a sharp intensity. Given his captivating looks, if I had seen him before, I should have remembered. Seeing that I didn't speak, the man continued. You don't remember my name either? Back at the police station, he had also given his statement, but my mind was entirely preoccupied with Bruce and his group. How could I have noticed him? I was about to shake my head, but seeing the man's dark expression, I instinctively explained. I was busy just now, so. Andrew Bell. What? My name is Andrew Bell. He repeated, then stared at me intently. Andrew Bell. Bell. I repeated his name under my breath, and suddenly, a light flashed in my mind. You're from Mr. Bell's family. Remember now? Andrew raised an eyebrow, looking a bit pleased. I felt embarrassed. Mr. Bell was my dad's former colleague, also living on Happiness Road. Andrew was 2 years older than me, and we used to play together as kids. About 10 years ago, his family moved abroad. I didn't expect Andrew to suddenly return to the country. Even more unexpected was that our first meeting after 10 years would be under such circumstances. And Andrew, who used to be dark and chubby boy, had now grown into a very captivating man. Both in looks and in build. The brief passion I had selectively forgotten from one night resurfaced in my mind. My ears grew hot. I quickly lowered my head to avoid him noticing anything unusual. I'm not going home yet, I have something to take care of. With Bruce being detained for questioning, I needed to go back to my apartment to deal with his things. This was also why I called the police. Even if Bruce was released due to lack of evidence, it would give me some time to handle our entanglement. Unexpectedly, Andrew took out his car keys and nodded with his chin. Let's go. I was slightly stunned. Huh? I'll go with you. Saying this, he had already walked to the car and opened the passenger door. As a thank you, I treated Andrew to breakfast nearby before directing him to my apartment. This apartment was bought by my parents for me. I had originally planned to use it as my marital home with Bruce. I packed up everything that had Bruce's traces and sent them to his company, then called a locksmith to change all the locks. When I finished, I noticed Andrew staring at the vanity table in the bedroom. Puzzled, I walked over. What are you looking at? He didn't reply but picked a hairpin from the organizer, then fiddled with the drawer handle, eventually pulling out a black button and holding it in front of me. A bad feeling rose in my heart, and my mouth went dry. This is... Andrew's voice was grim. A pinhole camera. I pushed Andrew to the living room and watched the footage of my daily life on the pinhole camera alone. I was so angry that my whole body was trembling, and I couldn't hold back my tears any longer. I had no idea where Bruce might have sent these recordings. I couldn't understand how I had ended up encountering such a scumbag. After I had cried enough and went out, Andrew was standing on the balcony, talking on the phone with his back to me. Hearing the door open, he hung up and turned around, his face still showing a trace of gloom. I just asked a friend to check, and the video hasn't been leaked. He spoke first. I felt a weight lift off my chest, but then I found it odd. How did you check? Andrew didn't explain in detail, just brushed it off vaguely, just trust me on this. The way he said it, I couldn't help but believe him. We handed over the pinhole camera and the stored video to the police, and 2 days later, Andrew brought me some news. The evidence is conclusive. Bruce won't get away this time. I had just finished attending an event when I heard this news, and finally, I felt at ease. Bruce was too extreme. If he were allowed to roam free, I was really worried about what he might do next. Andrew glanced at me. He didn't say anything, but my heart felt even more settled. My mom just called me, asking me to bring you home for a meal. I changed the subject. Hearing this, Andrew raised his eyebrows slightly, his whole demeanor exuding joy. Your mom still cares about me. I rolled my eyes. Indeed, when we were kids, my mom really liked Andrew, the chubby boy. And whenever there was something good to eat at home, she never forgot to share it with him. However, there was a doubt that had been lingering in my mind for a long time. Andrew, that night, why were you there? After asking, I stared at him. He paused in his steps and turned to look at me. Our eyes met, his eyes shimmering, and I was enveloped in that light. Suddenly, my heart skipped a beat, and I didn't dare to look at him anymore. My gaze fell, landing right on his well-defined Adam's apple. It was quite sexy. I was lost in thought when his voice suddenly reached my ears. Sorry. I was stunned, not understanding what he meant. Why are you apologizing all of a sudden? No, I should be thanking you. If it weren't for you that night, I would have. Emma. Andrew interrupted me in a deep voice. The light in his eyes grew even brighter. I'm apologizing because I couldn't hold back that night and offended you. Please forgive me. Boom. A raging fire ignited within me. I jumped up and covered his mouth, blushing and growling softly. Andrew! Stop talking. I had finally managed to selectively forget the passion of that night over the past 2 days, and now Andrew was suddenly bringing it up again? And what did he mean by couldn't hold back? A thought flashed through my mind, and I couldn't believe it. You knew it was me? I went there for you. Andrew answered my question with certainty. As he spoke, his cool lips brushed against my palm, sending a shiver from my palm to the tip of my heart. However, the information in his short sentences was too much. I guessed a possibility but didn't dare to believe it easily. I hastily let go of him, instinctively avoiding his gaze, and urged. Hurry up, my parents must be waiting anxiously. Fortunately, Andrew didn't press the issue further. In front of me, he always seemed to know when to advance and when to retreat. My parents were very warm towards Andrew. I found it strange. After dinner, while I was helping my mom wash the dishes, I secretly asked her. After all these years, how come you guys don't seem unfamiliar with him at all? My mom gave me a look. Who said we haven't seen him in years? Andrew has been visiting your dad and me every week for the past 2 or 3 months. He's more diligent than you, our own daughter. I paused in my actions. He's been back in the country for 2 or 3 months? With everything happening these past few days, I really hadn't asked him about this. My mom went on and on about Andrew. After leaving my mom's place, I kept stealing glances at Andrew. He quickly noticed and said helplessly, "If you have something to ask, just ask." I shook my head. Nothing, I just find it amazing. My mom said that Andrew is a lawyer abroad and is currently setting up his own firm. Not to mention my childhood impression of him, but just the other night when he swung that baseball bat with such fierceness and wildness. It seemed completely at odds with the meticulous profession of a lawyer. Amazingly, Andrew understood my unspoken thoughts. He smiled, raised an eyebrow, and looked at me. You're also beyond my expectations. My face felt a bit hot. I am an online novelist, recently delving into borderline literature. Unexpectedly, Andrew even knew about this. I averted my gaze. I'm just writing nonsense. I can tell. Andrew said, his deep eyes revealing a hint of meaning. It's very raw. I widened my eyes. Was he talking about my writing, or about me? Humph. He was clearly making a double entendre. I felt both embarrassed and annoyed, glaring at him. I can't compare to your wealth of experience. With the techniques he displayed that night, it was hard not to suspect he had been through countless battles. Andrew's lips curved up, and suddenly he bent down to stare straight at me. I remember a line from your book, "Love makes people learn without a teacher." His warm breath brushed against my face, and my heart skipped a beat. Andrew. My throat felt a bit dry as I reminded him. If you keep this up, I might misunderstand. Any wavering can't withstand repeated attacks. Being looked at by him like this and hearing such suggestive words, I felt that continuing to play dumb would just be self-deception. Andrew stopped smiling and responded seriously. It's not a misunderstanding. Since that day, Andrew has been appearing around me more frequently. He even moved next door to me. This afternoon, I had just woken up when I heard a loud knocking on my front door. I thought it was a delivery, so I called out. Please leave it at the door, thank you. The knocking stopped for a moment, then became even more forceful. I frowned and was just about to go to the door when my phone suddenly rang. It was Andrew. It's Bruce's parents. Don't open the door, I'll handle it. My mind went blank for a moment. Bruce's parents? Wasn't Bruce an orphan? And how did Andrew know them? Before I could voice my confusion, Andrew had already hung up. And soon after, I heard the sound of a door opening in the hallway, followed by Andrew's voice. He identified Bruce's parents and warned them that continuing to cause trouble would constitute harassment. His voice was cold and deep, flat and unyielding, making it clear that he was not someone to be messed with. I couldn't see Bruce's parents' expressions, but from their momentary pause, I knew they were also scared. But the next moment, Bruce's mother started to throw a tantrum. Oh! No wonder they were about to get married, and then she sent my son to jail. She has a lover. You adulterous couple. Her words were extremely harsh, ignoring Andrew's warning. Who is your son? Bruce? He always told me his parents died and that he was an orphan. I suddenly opened the door and coldly questioned the woman. I glanced at Andrew. He was wearing a dark blue loungewear set, with an apron tied around his waist, making it look very slim. Seeing me, the cold sharpness in his eyes softened a bit, and he gave me a disapproving look. I glared back. Stay behind the door and listen to someone insult him? Sorry, I couldn't do that. Besides, in my mind, someone like Andrew might be good at dealing with others, but probably couldn't handle a shrew like Bruce's mother. So I stepped in. I stood in front of Andrew, facing the couple directly. With just one look, I knew they were indeed Bruce's parents because I could see Bruce's features in their faces. Moreover, how could they have found this place if Bruce hadn't directed them? Since they didn't want me to have peace, I didn't need to consider their age. Are you really Bruce's parents? Then I have to ask, Bruce hired someone to assault me and installed pinhole camera in my room. If a child is not taught, it's the fault of the parents. Is this how you raised him? You're lying. My son would never do anything bad. There's solid evidence. Your son is being held at the police station. What are you here for now? Blackmail? Extortion? The police station contacted me yesterday saying there were some unresolved issues with Bruce. Shall I take you there to assist with the investigation? Bruce's mother was stunned by my words, unable to speak, and she started to jump up and rush at me. Stop spouting nonsense. I think you and your lover conspired to harm my son. Andrew pulled me behind him with one hand, and with the other, he firmly restrained Bruce's mother. I could only see his resolute and steady back, and heard his deep voice. I would love to be her lover, but she hasn't given me the chance yet. Moreover, you're suspected of defamation and slander against Emma. I will act as her attorney and sue you. As soon as he finished speaking, the elevator arrived. The property management staff came out and forcefully escorted Bruce's parents away. Bruce's mother was terrified by Andrew's coldness. But I noticed that Bruce's father, who had been silent, first stared greedily at my door, then gave me a venomous look. That look was like a poisonous snake. A chill ran down my spine. The next moment, Andrew put his arm around my shoulders, and warmth spread from his palm to my heart. This was my oversight. Don't be afraid, they won't dare to come back. Andrew. I turned to look at him. He lowered his lashes and suddenly smiled. Are you moved? Do you want to promise yourself to me? I paused and rolled my eyes at him. In your dreams. Andrew laughed heartily and pushed me back to wash up and then come over to his place for brunch. As he closed the door, I heard him say seriously, "Emma, I'm waiting for you to soberly and firmly agree to be with me. I hope it won't take too long." I paused, feeling a secret anticipation and joy rise in my heart. A turning point came quickly. Andrew's law firm was officially established, and he invited me to the celebration. "It's just a few friends having a meal together." Andrew said it casually, but I saw the anticipation in his eyes. To be honest, I was tempted too. But unfortunately, I had an event for a website to attend that day, and I couldn't get out of it. I didn't expect that the event would end early. I met up with a few writer friends to go singing together, and we happened to run into Andrew. At that moment, his handsome and cold face was a little red, and his deep, dark eyes were tinged with drunkenness. Leaning against the corridor wall, he looked more carefree and unrestrained. More importantly, there was a girl in a short strap dress standing in front of him. "Andrew, can you take me home after the party? I've been drinking, I can't drive." "Then I'll take you home." Listening to the girl's relentless pursuit, I stopped, wanting to hear how Andrew would respond. Then I saw Andrew turn his head and shout towards the private room behind him, "Damon, get out here now." The room fell silent, and a man with gold-rimmed glasses came out, looking helpless. Andrew spoke bluntly, "If you bring your sister in front of me again, don't blame me for turning hostile." Damon was obviously familiar with Andrew's temper and knew that he meant it without any room for negotiation. He nodded, but the girl was not convinced. "Andrew, I like you. Do you have a girlfriend? Why can't I chase you?" "Who said he doesn't have a girlfriend?" I stepped forward, linking my arm with Andrew's under his suddenly brightened gaze. After the girl was taken away by her brother, I heard Andrew ask me softly, "Emma, are you sure?" His voice, soaked in alcohol, was a bit hoarse, like it was squeezed out from his heart and lungs, making my heart itch. I turned to face him, looking up. "What do you think?" Andrew's Adam's apple bobbed, his thin lips opening and closing as if he didn't know how to answer my tricky question. "Don't know what to say." My voice was low, almost coaxing. Whether he was really drunk or not, he obediently nodded along with my words. I smiled. "Then don't say anything. A kiss will do." As I said that, I put a hand on his shoulder and kissed his lips. He had been waiting for this moment. As soon as my lips touched his, he immediately took control, capturing me fiercely. Andrew pressed me against the corridor wall. His hot palm rested on my waist, controlling my movements. I kept my eyes open. Likewise, his eyes, mixed with drunkenness and affection, were fixed on me. We looked at each other, allowing ourselves to indulge in each other with clear minds. Until I felt a discomfort in my lower abdomen, Andrew stopped, breathing heavily. But he didn't let go of me. Instead, he held me tightly in his arms, his burning lips brushing against my earlobe. "Let's go home." I thought going home would be a night of passionate love. To be honest, I was both nervous and excited. In this almost exuberant state, I didn't dare to drive, so I called for a chauffeur. All the way, Andrew held my wrist, his slightly rough fingertips drawing circles on my skin. Utterly teasing. As soon as we entered the door, Andrew pressed against me. His lips, carrying a hint of the night's chill, landed on my neck, sending shivers down my spine. I wrapped my arms around his slender waist, feeling the power stored within, and a roaring fire ignited inside me. Andrew's hand moved down, slipping into my dress, stirring up a storm. "Andrew." I tilted my neck, calling out to him with a whimper. Andrew responded from the crook of my shoulder, pecked me again, then lifted his face, revealing a pair of bloodshot eyes. His gaze made my heart tremble. Just as I was about to speak, I felt his fingers move, and in the next instant, a wave of unfamiliar, intense pleasure surged through me. I couldn't hold back and screamed. Andrew held me tightly. After catching my breath, I leaned in to kiss him, mimicking his actions, my hand moving towards his waist and abdomen. But Andrew stopped me. I looked at him, puzzled. He kissed my eyes, his voice tight, clearly struggling as well. "Wait a little longer." I teased him. "Until when?" "The wedding night." He said it so calmly, but I felt a warm, swelling sensation in my chest. The next day, the weather was warm and clear. It was a good day. For once, I didn't sleep in. After getting ready, it was only 7 o'clock. I went to knock on Andrew's door. When he opened it, he still looked confused. "Why are you up so early?" Seeing him like this, I opened my mouth but couldn't say anything. Andrew's short hair was damp with sweat, his white tank top soaked through and clinging to his body, revealing the defined lines of his waist and abdomen. My gaze drifted lower. His light gray sweatpants hung at his waist, hinting at certain indescribable outlines. I swallowed silently. With Andrew, it seemed I always had an excessive desire. Andrew must have noticed. He leaned casually against the door frame, a smile tugging at his lips, his long fingers tapping on his lean arm. His words were suggestive. Craving something this early? After all, it was broad daylight, and I knew how to restrain myself. Blushing, I coughed lightly and urged him. "Go wash up." Andrew was puzzled. "For what?" "To get the marriage certificate." I said these words clearly and forcefully. Andrew was actually stunned. Now it was my turn to feel smug. I raised an eyebrow at him. "Are you scared?" Andrew snapped out of it and nodded vigorously. When we arrived at the Civil Affairs Bureau, my parents were already there waiting with the household registration book. Seeing us, my mom kept urging us. After getting the certificate and looking at the bright red little book, my mom let out a long sigh of relief and then smiled so broadly that her eyes disappeared. The way she looked, it was more like she was welcoming a daughter-in-law rather than marrying off her daughter. But I was happy too. I glanced at Andrew, he was looking at me too. In our eyes, the same light was shining. At noon, both families had a meal together and discussed the wedding arrangements in a harmonious atmosphere. As the sun began to set, both sets of parents were still enthusiastic. I tugged at Andrew's sleeve. He smiled and played dumb. I scratched him in frustration. He grabbed my fingers. "Dads and moms, you continue discussing. Emma and I will head back first." The parents were stunned for a moment, but my mom reacted first. All right, you two go ahead." Saying this, my mom winked at me. With 4 pairs of eyes on me, my face was burning, but I still braved it and asked my mom for the marriage certificate. My mom was very cautious. "Why do you need it?" She thought I was having second thoughts. I didn't want to explain much and just said, "What are you thinking?" "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing." My mom didn't understand, but she still gave it to me. Only Andrew chuckled quietly. I placed the marriage certificate on the bedside table. Andrew stood by the bed, his tall figure giving me a lot of pressure. It was then that I started to feel nervous. "How about we take a bath first?" I was looking for something to say. Andrew suddenly leaned down, staring at me with eyes full of fire. "I didn't expect you to like this." "What?" I was stunned and then realized that what I had just said could easily be misunderstood. His breath made my face hot as I backed away and scolded him. "What are you thinking?" "I meant who goes first, you or me." "Together," he said, and with one motion, he wrapped his arm around my waist. In the next moment, my body was lifted in the air, and he held me up with one hand. Instinctively, I wrapped my arms around his neck, and now I was looking down at him. His breath was on my chest, making my skin under the thin fabric turn red. Andrew lightly pecked, then moved up my neck, finally landing on my lips. I responded immediately. We kissed passionately, unable to part. From the bedside to the dressing table, and when he pressed me against the bathroom sink, he whispered hoarsely in my ear. "Emma, I've been going crazy thinking about this day." I turned my face to kiss him, but just as I was about to speak, his actions broke all my words into pieces, making them incoherent. An uncontrolled Andrew was terrifying. Late at night, exhausted, I was finally washed and placed back in bed by him. I rested my head on his arm, my fingers playing with the necklace around his neck. A silver chain with a small clay doll the length of a little finger hanging from it. I rubbed the doll with my thumb. I always thought it was lost. This clay doll was my favorite toy when I was a child, but it disappeared at some point. Thinking back carefully, wasn't it after Andrew's family moved abroad that it went missing? I grabbed Andrew's face and demanded an explanation. So it was you who stole it? Andrew took the opportunity to hug me, his fingers gently stroking my smooth back as he answered seriously. So, I give myself to you as compensation.